how to keep your chill in dating, especially when you're new to dating someone. Now, I think maybe women get a little bit more into this, but we go on a date and we start projecting an entire future with someone after one date. You know, maybe we've been texting for a few days or a few weeks and we go on the date and it goes well, which now all of a sudden we're like, wow, there are great men out there. Oh my God, I didn't believe it. And maybe our fear of being alone or going back into the dating apps, we now start to cling on to the hope that this is the one. And we start projecting a whole entire fantasy over somebody we don't actually know. Oh, God, the amount of times I've done that and I've learned from it. So what we're going to need to do is actually recognize that that is just our nervous system going into attachment before we've actually gotten to know somebody. Okay. It's one thing. Let's just give the example of what maybe a healthy approach after a first or second date is when you're really hitting it off with someone. It's like, wow, I really like and enjoy them. I want to spend more time with them. I would like to see them again. And I would like to deepen the connection and get to know them more. Cool. Not, I need him to text me good morning now because we've been on one date and I need to hear it every day. Otherwise, fuck him. Okay. That would be the immature emotional part of you, right? You have a logical, adult, cool, sexy girl, right? Where you are well within your, emotional regulation and you know your standards and you're not going to project a fantasy. There is that side of you too. And oftentimes if we haven't healed kind of our either anxious attachment or our attachment issues that come from childhood, this person can trigger actually those attachment issues even after one date, even in the texting phase where we start to cling to the fantasy of who this person is. And even if they're love bombing, that makes it even harder if you're not aware that you're being love bombed or you're just so consumed with it, because guess what? You have hormones that are flooding your body and it is actually like basically flooding your brain with all these good feels and you can't see logic. Well, John Cena action here. You can't see it. The feelings feel very real. And then usually what ends up happening is 4 to 6 weeks later, things kind of implode. You've actually gotten to know this person a little bit more and they're not in alignment with you, or there's not compatibility there, or you guys just don't handle things the same way, but you've already attached to the fantasy of who they could be and what could be for you two instead of the reality of what is. And that's where it gets really, really tough, right? Because now you're starting to cling on to a future version of them and the fantasy that you had built out with actually not acknowledging who they are and that maybe you don't actually feel that great with them and that maybe they're not as good as you thought. And it's like you have this big disconnect in your head of like the fantasy version and how you used to feel in those first couple of weeks when things were all juicy and good. It's just the natural part of getting to know someone. You're not going to be compatible with everyone. In fact, there's probably very few people they're actually going to be compatible with. And dating is doing its job for you to learn, hey, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good in my body. Whether it's you leaning into anxious attachment, them going into avoidant, or vice versa, or you guys just don't get along all that well and you are clinging to a fantasy over the first couple weeks of knowing someone. Where we often have this kind of short-sighted view of dating is that 5 to 10 years from now, that doesn't get much better, right? If you are starting to have conflict in early dating, your relationship tools are happening very early on. And it's this phrase of like, the reason that the red flags you ignored in the beginning are the reasons that you separate in the end. It's pretty true, right? They show you who you are, but because you're flooded with chemicals, hormones, the feel goods, right? Especially if you start sleeping together very early on, whole bunch of different mix of chemicals happening. When you start to do that, you start to get attached to a fantasy and not reality. And so we have a big disconnect of, I don't want to lose the fantasy because the fantasy was so good, but the reality sucks. So if I just hold on a little bit longer, or if I change everything about me, maybe I'll get to that fantasy-based thinking. There's a difference between having hope for someone and a partnership that you could have when it's based on how good things are now versus having a objective view, right? The logical view of, is this going to work for me long term, right? Am I starting to see hints and signs that this person actually can't communicate very well, that they avoid tough conversations, that they're hot and cold and maybe aren't emotionally regulated, and now I'm experiencing that hot cold with them? Those are all valuable things to start to assess very early on in a relationship. So what do? You need to recognize where emotions are making the decisions versus your more adult self. We'll call it logic, but it's not always logic in your feelings. It is understanding the balance between the two, right? We want you to fall in love. I think every one of us would love the idea of a really healthy, reciprocal, healthy relationship. However, most of y'all don't know what that is. That's why I feel like divorce rates are so high, is that we are picking people off of our wounded childhood, having unmet needs from childhood, right? We don't recognize that the attachment we developed as children and our definition of love and what we saw love to be between our parents, or the attachment we had as individuals with our parents and the hurts that were experienced with that, we all have them. Even if you had amazing parents, there were still rejection in there. Then we use that inner child version of us trying to find partners to heal that inner child. That's where it gets messy, right? Because that's where our inner child, who, let's face it, can any children pick partners for life? Probably not. They're making the decisions on a partner. There is a feeling of familiarity you have with your attachment, your desire for that person, that may not be rooted in healthy love. And so it's really learning, how do I define healthy love, and how have I been experiencing different from healthy love? And if you don't know what a definition of a healthy love is, don't get into a relationship. Right? Well, I mean, you're going to learn the hard way, but it's getting clear on what healthy love means to you, what that looks like to you. And you can use past experience of relationship of healthy love is not this, right? If somebody is mistreating you, if somebody is belittling you, if somebody won't have a conversation with you, they're stonewalling you, they're cheating on you, that's not healthy love. So why are you involved with somebody who isn't reflecting back to you healthy love? Chances are because you don't know what healthy love is. You don't know what it feels like in your nervous system. And most of the time we equate fireworks and that spike of our nervous system and that hot, cold, that push pull to, oh my God, this must be love and infatuation. But it's actually your nervous system going, danger, run, this is a problem, ring all the alarm bells. But we see it as attraction and lust and passion, and that dopamine hit when we get the breadcrumb, when we get the little hint of attention and affection, or it's good and then it's not good, and then it's good and then it's not good. That's not healthy. That is not sustainable for your nervous system long term. And so what happens long term with that kind of ups and downs in your nervous system is that you start to neglect yourself. You start to compensate and regulate your emotions through external stuff. Called codependency, right? Whether that's your partner you're trying to, control, manipulate so they treat you well. Whether that, for me, it was food and alcohol, right? I was turning to food because my anxiety and my stress with my ex-husband was just through the roof, and I didn't know how to emotionally regulate myself. And so I was using everything outside of me to do that. That's a losing game, doesn't work. People turn to cheating, they turn to drugs, they turn to emotional affairs, they turn to social media addictions, they turn to all sorts of external stuff to feel better inside. The life hack I can give you is that you create from the inside out. So if your nervous system is dysregulated, you will notice in your 3D world, your environment, that there's a lot of dysregulation and chaos because internally you're chaotic. If you can work on soothing and healing the internal, right, your external world will reflect that. You will start to see those behaviors as either immature or toxic or unhealthy, and you will start to advocate for yourself and use your voice to be able to speak up for your wants and your needs. And if your partner chooses not to go on that journey with you, you have your answer of what kind of partner they actually are, rather than the fantasy-based thinking version of them. And so for me, the best tool for that was somatic breathwork, soma being your body, being able to move emotions out of the body so I could get to clarity and not this external noise and all of the fears of what if we break up, what if we don't, what if we stay together, what if we don't, what's a divorce going to look like, and all of those fears, right? And I got clarity by releasing the repressed emotions, letting the fear out, letting the sadness out, letting the grief out, letting the anger out, getting it all out in a safe container. And then what I'm left with is my true intuition, my voice, my clarity on what it is that I want and where I may be disconnected or out of alignment with that in my life. So that's why I became a breathwork facilitator, because it's fucking magic. Fucking magic. So if you want to learn more about it, you DM me. Let's chit chat, because it's life changing.